Many policymakers cite housing as a key obstacle to economic recovery. We're going to talk about that with Doug Duncan, the chief economist for Fannie Mae. Doug Duncan, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So everyone says that unemployment and getting people back to work is the key to an economic recovery. How does housing fit into that mix?
Oh, we would agree with that statement. The impact on housing is that people who get jobs form households, they earn incomes, and initially they become renters, but when they become renters, others become move-up households into buying. So the employment is really the key question in the demand for housing.
But it's sort of a chicken and egg thing, right? If the housing market were to improve, would that actually help improve the economy?
It would. It's not the driver, but it is a significant contributor. The average contribution of housing to first year's growth after a recession is about 18% of the GDP growth. So you can see it's one of 5 new dollars roughly that's produced. Very important.
So in this recovery, such as it is, what contribution have we seen?
Negative.
Wow.
It's actually, for the first time in any recession since World War II, it has been a drag on growth. And that's both on economic growth and employment.
Well, so that fits nicely into the idea that the Fed has just come out and said Fannie and Freddie should get more involved in trying to boost the housing market. How do you feel about that? What can you do?
Well, we're pretty involved between us and Freddie and Ginnie. We're about 90% of the market. And we've helped refinance several million households and produced mortgages for people that wanted to buy houses. I think the question that they're addressing is whether or not in the delinquent and foreclosed loans there's more that we could do. We would argue we're trying to do as much as we can while watching taxpayer costs in the process.
Now, we hear a lot of reports about HAMP, and I guess it's HARP, and that there were big numbers originally proposed for how many people that could help, and yet the numbers now are pretty small, and we keep on hearing from people who say they've tried to get modifications, but they get bogged down in paperwork, and the bank loses it, and the terms change on them, and we've really seen very few modifications. Is there more that can be done?
Well, they differentiate between modifications and refinances, which the HAMP was more about modifications, HARP is more about refinances. No question the results in the big picture in HAMP were disappointing relative to the expectations that were set up front. Part of it was the complexity of the programs. And there have been some efforts to simplify that. I think that we may see more in that space. On the HARP side, it's more about the practical aspects of what consumers face. For example, bringing cash to the table when they're worried about losing their job, which our surveys show about a quarter of employed people are worried about whether they'll still be employed in 6 months. Well, if refinancing requires you to bring $4,000 to $6,000 to the table to save $150 a month, that's an inhibitor to actually taking action on that.
Sure. Well, for those people who actually have lost their job, you've just changed it so that they can go, I guess now in some circumstances, a year without paying their mortgage. They'll still owe it, but they can suspend payments for a year. Do you think that'll have a big impact in positively, or could it just kick the can down the road?
I think it'll have a positive impact, but it's at the margin. The problem is people have been looking for a silver bullet to solve the whole thing, and really what we need is a whole series of actions which are taking shape or have taken shape over time.
Now, while the Fed is saying get more involved in the housing market, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, other voices are saying the government has no business getting involved in housing. They should just get out. Obviously, if you did that cold turkey, we'd be in a heap of trouble. But bigger picture, is that possible? Is it a good idea?
Well, it's not. You can't do that instantaneously. If you view Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are in conservatorship, as part of the government at this point, and we manage somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 trillion of mortgages between us, that will have to continue. I think there's an agreement societally that we would prefer to see a lot more private market participation, and that's a policy question that's going to be debated for some time, exactly how to enact that.
If we did move in that direction, would mortgage rates spike?
It depends on how it's done. If you include Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as part of the government, which the two of us plus Ginnie Mae are really 90% of the market today, you'd have to deal with the fact that we manage about $5 trillion of mortgages or more, including Ginnie Mae. So an abrupt departure is really unrealistic. Depending on how the withdrawal is done, for example, with the Federal Reserve, which has explicitly entered the market to bring down rates and spreads, if that extraction were to occur, you would expect rates to rise and costs to rise to consumers. So there certainly can be an impact on that.
Doug Duncan, thanks very much. You can read more about the housing market and the economy right here on CBSMoneyWatch.com.